Hi, Jorge Parrott here, the president of CMM, Christ's Mandate for Missions, formerly Correll Missionary Ministries, and give you greetings. Yesterday I had the privilege and the pleasure of attending a meeting with at a summit in Washington, D.C., in our nation's capital, with a group called SaveThePersecutedChristians.org, led by Frank Gaffney, who was Reagan's Center for Policy leader for years and has been active in righteousness in our nation and also Christian activities and defense and justice in the United States during that time. And also Ambassador Sam Brownback was there, the former governor and senator of the state of Kansas was there. And we were talking about the state of the persecuted church and the increasing persecution that we're facing today in our lifetime, where more than 215 million people are facing life-threatening situations and increasing persecution around the nations. Many of these are missionaries with us, or their countries are represented in missionaries and friends that we have in Pakistan and Nigeria and Iran, Iraq, Syria, Turkey. We talked and we prayed for our good friend Andrew Brunson, who's in jail under house arrest in Izmir, Turkey, and for his wife Noreen and their precious family. And there's been an increasing public awareness going on under President Donald Trump. Whether you like him or not, he is bringing into more limelight and more of the forefront of media of the persecution of Christians that are going on around the world. And I wanted to share that this morning I was reading a book by an Italian man, and he was talking about heirloom tomatoes. Let's shift gears for a minute. You that have been around or alive for a few years, like I've been for a few decades, we remember what homegrown tomatoes taste like. And nowadays we call them heirloom tomatoes because a lot of the tomatoes we buy in the supermarket, they look like a tomato, but they don't taste much like a tomato. And it's hard to find a real homegrown tomato, and how much we just love homegrown vegetables, things that haven't been doctored or chemicalized or treated with GMOs or had their DNA restructured. And I was reminded of the scriptures about the Lord calling us to be salt and light in this world. In Matthew 5:13, it says, "You are the salt of the earth, but if the salt loses its flavor, how shall it be seasoned? It is then good for nothing but to be thrown out and trampled underfoot by men." And, in terms of the persecuted church worldwide today and how many in the West just don't seem to be very in tune with it, or they don't relate to it. But I want to remind you that in the New Testament, of all the scriptures that have to do with money or finances or sowing or giving or tithing, more than 2/3 of those scriptures in the New Testament talk about giving to those who are suffering or those who are being persecuted for their faith. In Revelations 2:4, the Lord is talking to the church in Ephesus, and he says, "I know your works, your labor, your patience, and that you cannot bear those who are evil. And you have tested those who say they are apostles and are not, and have found them to be liars. And you have persevered, and you've had patience, and have labored for my name's sake, and have not become weary. Nevertheless, I have this against you, that you have left your first love." And so remember what those heirloom tomatoes taste like. Remember when we first came to Jesus Christ, when we became born again, of that exhilaration of like, oh, I remember it now. I remember the day and the hour when I made that decision and that commitment of that Jesus was truly the Savior in my heart. And I repented of my sins, knowing that I was just lost without him, that I could do nothing without Jesus. And as his presence came into my life and that salvation, that miracle of salvation came upon me, it was like, oh, Lord, let me remember my first love, and that's you, Jesus. Now concerning the collection for the saints, as I have given orders to the churches of Galatia, so you must do also. This was not a suggestion or an option. This was Paul saying, so you must do also. On the first day of the week, let each one of you lay something aside, storing up as he may prosper. They were not wealthy at that time. They had bills to pay. They had challenges. They had mouths in their family to feed and houses to take care of, or crops or animals to take care of. But yet we are told repeatedly, over 2/3 of the verses about money in the New Testament talk about giving funds, sowing into those lives that are suffering, less fortunate than ourselves, or are being persecuted for their faith. In 2 Corinthians 8, 1-7, we read, moreover, brethren, we make known to you the grace of God bestowed on the churches of Macedonia, that in the great trial of affliction, the abundance of their joy and their deep poverty abounded in the riches of their liberality. The Lord loves a cheerful giver. For I bear witness that according to their ability, yes, and beyond their ability, they were freely willing, imploring us with much urgency, that we would receive the gift and the fellowship of the ministering to the saints. And not only as we had hoped, but they first gave themselves to the Lord, and then to us by the will of God. So we urged Titus that as he had begun, so he would also complete this grace in you as well. But as you abound in everything, in faith, in speech, in knowledge, in all diligence, and in your love for us, see that you abound in this grace also. They're talking about the grace that abounds from giving and supporting those that are in need, less fortunate than ourselves, and those that are being persecuted for their faith. Senator or Congressman Frank Wolf, who's retired from Virginia, he had talked yesterday at this meeting of Save the Persecuted Christians. Impassioned speech. I implore you to look up Frank Wolf from Virginia and how his life's mission, as most people would be retired, he's on a crusade to educate and build awareness in the world of the persecuted Christians, of what's going on. He shared about being in South Sudan, in Burma, Myanmar, in Nigeria, and many of these people in countries like Syria and Iraq, and particularly those in Nigeria, were saying to him, and we've had our friends say to us, does anyone in the West care? In Nigeria, in the last 2 years, it's estimated that 16,000 of our brothers and sisters have been martyred in Nigeria, many of them by Boko Haram, and there's another terrorist group. And we have friends there, dear friends, missionaries with CMM, who we've helped a little bit at times, but I feel like we really should do more. One group rescued 1,000 widows in the northern part of Nigeria, where every one of those 1,000 women, their husbands were killed, murdered, massacred, tortured by Boko Haram. Another group in Lagos, they rescued 400 orphans from northern Nigeria. Imagine the faces of these people, of widows who'd had their husbands killed, murdered. In fact, many times they were eyewitness to their husband's murder and the torture that they suffered. Or the 400 faces of these children that had both parents killed, taken from them violently at such a young age. And our friends in Lagos brought them down to the south, and they put them in Christian homes around the city of Lagos to care for them, to give them hope and the love of Jesus, and raise them up in the fear and admonition of the Lord, give them a Christian education, give health care to them, and love on them just as their own family members. And so be in prayer for the persecuted church. It is increasing. It is spreading. We heard from one Jewish rabbi, Jonathan Hausman, I believe is his name, from New York City. He talked about how thousands of his relatives were killed in the Holocaust in World War II. And it is just touching. And he said, if it happened to the Jews, it will happen to you. And we are seeing this now where 215 million Christians around the world, many in the 1040 window, many facing persecution by Muslims. And, we don't hate the Muslims, we hate the sin, but the Lord is winning many to Jesus. We've met many ourselves and hear testimony after testimony of Muslims seeing the man in white or Jesus himself appearing to them, and their lives are instantly and forever changed. So we live in miraculous times. And with the media, with the influence that we have, I would ask you to pray about this and inquire of the Lord, as David did, of what he would have you to do. You can pray, you can intercede, you can join our intercession network, email me at officecmm@gmail.com to get on our intercession list. Or would he have you to sow and to give? It could be the widow's mite, or 100 people giving $10, or 1,000 people giving $1. But something can be done to help our brothers and sisters and to let them know that you're praying for them, that you care for them, and that there will be this revival, this resurgence of Christianity in the American churches to remember our brethren in change, as it says in Hebrews 13:3, that we would remember those that are suffering and in persecution. And God bless you. We know that Jesus is coming back soon, and God sits on the throne, and we have this great joy everlasting for all eternity. But there's work that we can do now, and there's prayers that can be prayed that can make a difference and that can move mountains. So thank you. We really appreciate your time and your prayers. God bless you.